Hello. I'm not Matt Trout, unfortunately. Oh, well, Matt unfortunately didn't feel well this morning, so he's not going to give his talk, and I volunteered to jump in. So if you're interested in turning humans into developers with Perl, and you haven't seen this last year, you're welcome to stay. If you're not interested, you're welcome to stay as well. You're also welcome to listen anyway. Heckle, do you want to come upstairs, like to the stage, and pretend you're the trainee? Oh, I don't know. We can try to do like a mentoring situation. I can teach you some Perl. For the stream, that was Nicholas Clark wanting to heckle. I think I scared him off. Don't do that with your trainees. Right. Anyway, I'm Julien. I work at Olio in London. We make hiring software, and I was talking about our hiring process yesterday upstairs. So I'm now jumping in and repeating the talk I did last year in Glasgow about training the people you found. So this is not about programming. So this is a little bit about mentoring, a little bit about training, about sharing tech knowledge, and getting people to be motivated. Don't expect Perl, don't expect Camellia. There's not going to be much of either, but I think it's quite useful at work. I also don't think I can fill the full 45 minutes, but we'll just go and see how far we get. Maybe we can have a little discussion. Maybe Nick wants to come up on the stage anyway afterwards and tell me what I'm doing wrong. We'll see. So, this doesn't work. That's a good start. Why does it not work? Why do I have to click it? Here? No. That's bad. Let's click it here. That works. Who of you is a developer? Show of hands. Let's see who's listening. Everyone. Okay. So, who of you has trained a developer? Sorry I shows this. Good. So I was paying attention. Cool. But let's leave the hands up. Who did that? What did I do? Who did the training? Like, who got trained not in university? That's me as well. That's not that many. Something is weird. Sorry. Right. So, basically, a lot of us don't go to university, because in some countries it's really normal to study IT, to study computer science, but in some countries it's not, and there's sort of this split in the middle of any tech community. For example, I tried to go to university and it didn't really work out for me, so I did something else. In Germany we have this apprenticeship, which is a 3-year program where you just go and you find the company that hires you, and then you work there, and they pay you a little bit of a salary, and at the same time you go to school, and then the school, they teach you all of those technical skills that you need, but you don't actually use at work sometimes, and they teach you all the theory, and they teach you about economics and English and all kinds of things. And at the same time you work. So you solve real problems and you contribute value to your company. Most people who do that, they don't have technical knowledge in the beginning. So mostly they're just straight out of school. Maybe they've done A-levels or Abitur or Matura or whatever that's called in your country. And then over a course of 3 years, they will be trained. And when they're done, they are hopefully a more or less fully fledged developer, or a sysadmin, or someone who works with cables and telecom, or maybe even a technical salesperson, or all kinds of these things. But they will have 3 years of practical experience, whereas someone from university doesn't. And the main difference to studying at university is that your company decides what you learn. So in my case, I ended up at this relatively big e-com company that happened to sell car tires, these black round rubbery things with a hole in the middle, and they happened to use Perl. And that's why I'm here today, because that company said, well, in your CV it says you did some PHP. We do Perl. I hope you don't mind. And I said, well, if you give me a job, I'm happy. So I did Perl, and well, a lot of things happened, and now I'm here giving talks on conferences. So that's my story for the Perl community. Anyway, that's what I did. But I want to know what you did. Think about the first day on the job, when you first started to work as a developer. Just take a moment, remember that. Your very first dev job or tech job. What did you do, and did you enjoy doing that? Did you enjoy it? Who enjoyed it? Not as many hands, okay. Were you looking forward to the second day? Yeah, I did. So for me, what happened was I got put into this nice glass building in the city center. They gave me a nice office. There was one other guy there. I set up my computer, and then some other coworker, he approached me and he said, hey, here's this piece of code. It's HTML, it's a competitor website, and we need you to write this function that gets all the prices and article numbers. Can you do that? I was like, yeah, okay, I worked through learning Perl, I'll figure it out. I have half a day left. So I wrote some regexes. It's always a good idea, obviously, to pass HTML with regexes. And I wrote it, and I gave it to him. And the next morning, when I got back in, he said, hey, thanks for that code. It worked. I put it in production. I was like, yay. I actually contributed value on my very first day. And it was such an amazing feeling after a year of sitting in university and feeling like I'm stuck and I don't progress at all and I'm not learning anything. That was the best thing that could have happened. And I loved it. And then 2 months later, when I got to go to school, to the vocational school, the person who sat next to me, he asked me, what do you do at work? Like, my boss has already allowed me to sometimes write some websites. And at that point, I was just contributing normally. I was writing Perl code. I'd already implemented some APIs to package delivery services and like parcel services and things. And I felt a bit bad to tell him that. So I went, well, I'm part of the team. Yeah, but that's kind of the difference between a good job on a good company and the company that doesn't do so well. And it's the difference between being mentored and not being mentored. So let's start talking about mentoring. You have a lot of different roles as a mentor. Probably the most obvious one is that you teach people. You're a teacher, right? Yeah, but you're usually also their manager. So you tell them what to do, and you give them tasks, and you allow them to go on holiday, and you tell them when to come into work. And sometimes you're their boss, which I think is a bit different, because once in a while you have to tell them off because they did something wrong, they misbehaved, they offended a coworker, they didn't show up, whatever. Those things happen. If you work with younger people who are new to the workforce, they'll sometimes not know how to do things right, and then you'll have to help them overcome those problems. So you're also a role model, which is basically showing them how to do things right. So if you tell them to be in the office at 8 and you consider it like you consistently show up inconsistently at like 9 or at 10, or sometimes you don't show up at all and just decide at 11 I'll work from home, that's not really showing them how to do it properly. Unless that's your office culture and you don't care, but still, if you want them to succeed in the business world, it's probably a good idea to show them how to do it right. So you're a role model. Then next, you're a motivator, because motivation is the most important thing if we're learning. If we're not motivated, nothing will get stuck in our head, and it's just all for naught. So you have to constantly motivate your trainees or your apprentices or your mentees, whatever we want to call them, because you don't want them to lose that motivation. You don't want them to lose the momentum that they have that keeps them learning. Then sometimes, especially if you hire younger ones, you will have to take the role of a parent, even if you're just a few years older yourself, because when you gain their trust, they will start confiding in you. You will start talking about your personal lives, and every once in a while they'll face a problem. Maybe they have a partner and something breaks up, and they're going to be super down, and then you have to motivate them again. And sometimes you just have to help them with tough life choices, and all of those things will happen because you're probably the person they'll spend the most time with for a few years, given that we're 8 or 9 hours in the office, mostly 5 days a week. And that sort of blends over into being a friend, because if you want to really gain someone's trust, you have to be their friend, essentially. And as I said, we spend lots of time together, so giving advice on all kinds of things, and once in a while asking advice as well. Like, talk about favorite movies, you wonder what game should I play next. Maybe your trainee knows those things better than you do. So there's a little bit of friendship involved as well. That, how do I do that? It's really simple and really obvious, but those are also really hard things to start doing properly. First of all, you always need to be available. So imagine a larger office. It's like open plan, it's loud, you're wearing your headphones. So because it's loud and you just want to listen to music so you can concentrate at all, I think most of us can relate to that. And then 3 tables down, 3 desks down, there's your trainee, and they're stuck. And they're like, he's wearing headphones again. Damn it, I can't talk to them. Let's try and message him, but you probably not see it anyway because he's turned it off because for whatever reasons. So I'm just going to sit here and hope for the best. No, that's not good. You have to tell him, hey, if you have any questions, I'm over there. You can come to me anytime, and if I wear the headphones, it's just because the other guy's keyboard is so loud. Because he's got those blue switches in his keyboard and he doesn't care about anyone else. So just come over, tap me on the shoulder, or shoot me with the Nerf gun or whatever, or wave something in front of my eyes. I don't mind if you interrupt me. I mind if the other people interrupt me, maybe because I'm trying to be productive here with my own code, but I also want you to be productive. So it's totally fine if you interrupt me, and if I don't see it, just come over, tap me on the shoulder, it's fine. You can ask me questions anytime. And this is not obvious to someone who's new in the workforce. They don't know that. They can't see into your head. So you have to tell them. Then you want to lead by example. I've already mentioned that a little bit. So you show up on time when there's a stand-up or some other kind of meeting. You don't interrupt people. You behave in the way that you want them to behave. Otherwise, they'll copy you anyway. And if you're a bad example, they're going to copy all of your bad habits. We all have them. It happens once in a while, but I think it's important to be an example in a way that you can say, okay, I did something wrong. I'm admitting that I did something wrong here. Let's see how I can be better, and then make sure that you're also better. And you can maybe even be better than I am. That's the real example. And you want to always help them to help themselves. You don't just solve a problem for them. You don't answer all their questions. You basically teach them how to fish rather than just feed them. Whenever I am approached with a simple question that I could just answer because I know the answer, I will usually not tell them. I will just say, maybe you want to look at this doc, or maybe you should try this instead. Because that way they will actually have the feeling of accomplishment that they've solved themselves, rather than learning that it's fine to just keep going there and getting spoon-fed with little solutions, which obviously sometimes needs to happen, but most of the time you want your trainees to learn how to do that themselves. So what I like to do is, when I get up from my desk to get a new cup of tea or something, I will always go past their desks, or at least one of their desks, and just take a look what they're doing. Maybe not even say anything, just see, okay, it's reading code. Let's go wander off, get a cup of tea, come back, oh, he's still in the same thing. Let's see, oh hey, there's a semicolon missing, and then just wander off again. It shows that you're there, it shows that you care about them, it shows that you're aware that they're actually working, and that they are trying to solve something here, and that they're trying to be as productive as they can, and that keeps their motivation up. Over time, you learn how to spot problems, and how to spot where someone's stuck, and how to anticipate what kind of mistakes or what kind of problems they'll face. And that way, by just nudging them in the right direction, it will be much more comfortable for both of you, because it will consume less of your time and will teach them to be autonomous. So that's definitely something I recommend doing. And in the same vein, you also need to know when not to help them. So sometimes it's better to just leave them alone. If you see they're stuck there, but they're already Googling, just ignore it. Just take a quick glance and wander off again. Because why interrupt them if they're obviously already on the right track? There's no reason to take that achievement from them. So that's quite important. And then you also want to give them responsibility. when they're always doing really simple things, they get demotivated at some point. But over time, you want to grow those tasks, and you're going to give them bigger things to do. So a fairly easy one here is that initially maybe they're not allowed to commit their own code because the source control system is not as good as we want it to be, and there's maybe only an SVN trunk, and there's maybe just a button to deploy things, which is quite agile, I think. It's quite continuous deployment, really. But if you press that button and your code has some bugs because there's no quality assurance system and there are no unit tests, maybe the first few months you don't want them to click that button. At least not before you've seen the code. So the obvious first step here is at some point to stop to stop pushing the code for them or releasing the code for them, but to tell them, okay, let's do this together now, and then later on, like, okay, I have to look at it, but it's fine that you deploy it yourself, step by step. Give them responsibility, a little bit at a time, but make them feel like they're growing. Or in the same way, you can after a while let them review your pull requests to the code base. So go through their code with them, and then go through your code with them, and give them the feeling that you're not above them. You're on the same level in some ways. Obviously, you know more than them about programming and about work, but you still value their input. And that already blends into the next point of how to do that. We want to build rapport. We want to be able to really talk to them and understand the way they think, and we want them to be able to talk to us as well. So that can be achieved by learning about them and seeing the person behind that trainee, behind that junior developer, that individual aspiring to be a junior developer. Ask them about their weekend, ask them what they're planning to do in their holiday, ask them about their personal interests, share yours. I've watched that movie yesterday and I didn't like it. Have you watched it? Or I've seen this interesting new open source project and I'm going to contribute, and I saw there's lots of stuff that you could maybe try to fix as well. How about writing some docs for the PerlCon? Why not? It's going to be fun. You can do that. And it's going to put your name in that list. And encourage them to do the same kind of things that you enjoy. And also be open to look at the things they enjoy. That will make you much closer. Let's talk about motivation next. How do we motivate someone? So first of all, you always need to make sure that they understand that their work matters. There's nothing worse than doing a tutorial for the sake of doing a tutorial and then throwing away the code. You get something to work, yay, hooray, let's delete it. Forget about it. It's not fun. It feels like you're not very valuable. So instead, I think it's much better to mix learning and, I was going to say real work, but the learning is real work as well. Let's mix the learning with productive work where we generate value for the company. We could, for example, have in the very beginning half a day of an online course like Geek Uni for Perl or Free Code Camp for front-end development or something like that. Or we can work through books like Beginning Perl or Learning Perl, which have short, nice chapters with exercises in the end that you can just look at one by one and say, okay, maybe you want to use different variable names, maybe you want to indent your code better. Why? Well, it's easier to read, and later on it's going to be easier to change it. And real tickets, simple real tickets. They can be really easy in the beginning. They can write unit tests for small functions. They can refactor some code, make variable names better. They can, if you have your own website, maybe simplify the code, small individual tasks, and then over time you will grow them bigger. And eventually it's not going to look like it's a tutorial that you've written into your ticket, but instead it can become more of like a user story where it says, I want you to build this, but I'm not telling you how. Or maybe I'm just going to talk to you about how to build it. So you could, for example, look at this library and then implement it this way, and then maybe use this kind of backend for it. And I think if you look at this existing code, that's how we can integrate it. And again, then you wander off, and if they take your advice, great. And if not, well, maybe they'll come up with a better way, and if not, they'll still learn something in the process. They might learn something completely unrelated, and they might learn how the way they've done it is maybe not the most efficient way. And maybe it doesn't matter that it's not efficient, and maybe it does. But there's always learning in everything. And what's also important is to make them see that they're accomplishing something. I've got this picture of the little cards. This is from the company I worked at previously, where I would always get a fresh apprentice every 3 months, and I would kind of break them in because they'd come straight out of school. And in that case, our head of the department didn't want me to allow them access to the production code, so we had to come up with something else, and we found our own customer. That was a hosting company. There were lots of tech departments, but there was no real in-house IT for some of the departments, the other departments. So I approached HR, who I was working closely with anyway, and I said, do you need anything? And they went, yeah, well, actually, we could use this kind of tool. So that became the trainee project. And over the course of 5 or 6 different trainees, we made this into a fully fledged Catalyst application with lots of features that everyone in the company used, from the trainees up to the CEO. And that was prestigious, and they were recognized for it. And we integrated it into our processes in our team. So those are actually agile cards that resemble tickets in Jira, but we had a daily stand-up in front of a real physical Scrum board, or Kanban, Scrumban board, whatever. It's whiteboards that hung on the wall with actual physical cards with stickers and our names on them. And every morning we'd stand near that board and go on about what we were doing and what we wanted to do, and the way a stand-up goes. And you would move these tickets, and when you were done, you'd take the tickets off. And they kept their tickets, and each of them had the stack of finished cards. And it grew over these 3 months, and it felt like they'd actually done something real. There's this measure, and that makes a huge difference if you have that. And you can even do that if you don't have physical cards. You can have post-it notes that stick to a screen, and then you get one of those restaurant spikes, and there's like this huge stack of finished tickets. But there should be some way of measuring achievements, because otherwise you're not going to see that you're actually progressing and that you're productive. Right, so that was mentoring. Let's look at training. I think there's a difference. But first of all, what actually defines a developer? I believe there are 2 sides to that. There are hard skills and there are soft skills. So hard skills are fairly obvious. They are probably programming for a developer, but developing is much more. You have to know about data structures and algorithms. You should probably know about project management and maybe a little bit of product management as well. You should know about version control and maybe understand what the differences are in different version controls and why we prefer Git over CVS. Or maybe we don't, depends what we're working on. And there's always the tool chain, there are unit tests, there are code as well, there's a deployment system, there might be a Jenkins, there might be a ticket system, there are all kinds of things that attach to this whole developing process. And these are fairly easy to teach because, well, you just program and then you program some more, and at some point you'll encounter kind of the same problems again and again, and you'll know how to solve them. And there are tutorials, and there's Stack Overflow, and there are all kinds of nice things. But what about the soft skills? What about things like independent thinking? How do you write a tutorial to teach someone how to think? I think that currently the newspapers are not doing a very good job at that, and I'm sure it's very hard to actually do that. So this can only work if you lead by example. Curiosity is another really important one that a developer needs to have, in my opinion. A good developer needs to have this urge to understand what the heck is going on. How does something work? I bet most of us have taken something apart to understand how it functions, and maybe then had some screws left after putting it back together, if we put it back together at all. So that's the kind of thing you want to encourage. Professionalism is another one. Again, if we just hired someone straight out of school or straight out of university, and they may not have worked in a company at all. They may never have actually worked and got paid for it before. So they have no idea how to behave in an office. They don't know about office politics. They don't know about social rules. They don't know that you do not take the coffee mug of your coworker out of the cupboard and use that, because that particular coworker gets really grumpy and angry and starts yelling at you. Or they send an email to the entire company's mailing list for 500 people saying, "Where's my mug?" And then 20 people respond, and everyone gets loads of emails, and it's all your fault because you picked the wrong mug, because you didn't pay attention. So you have to help them navigate these kinds of things. That's professionalism. And sometimes you will need to address these. That's the bit where you have to be the boss. Then you need to be able to play well with others. You don't interrupt people. You don't unsolicitedly take your shoes off in the office, maybe, unless they're wet, and then you have home shoes. Some offices do that. But there's a lot of things. There are a lot of things where communication in a professional manner is something that needs to be learned. And when not every one of us is good at this, and a lot of us weren't good at this in the past, but are now, because we've learned it from others and through hard work. And again, you need to lead by example. Then you need to teach them how to ask questions. And I don't only mean encouraging them to ask the question, but also teach them how to ask the right questions. Because it will always be better to ask, how do I do this? Or how can I get to doing this, rather than, can you do this for me? Like asking why rather than what is much better, in my opinion. And I think stuff like Stack Overflow includes this really well. Like someone who can write a really good question on Stack Overflow often doesn't need to post it afterwards. And that is something that needs to be learned. I see that every day when I browse Stack Overflow. And then there's the business knowledge, of course, because they're new to your company as well. And there's this 15-year application that's been growing, and there's so much business knowledge in there, and half of it hasn't been written down, and then there's little documentation, and some people left, and how are they going to navigate that? If you're lucky, you know half of it, maybe. So you should encourage them to share that knowledge and maybe write it down. That's also pretty good in the beginning, to encourage them to write documentation for everything that they understand whenever they understand something. And then everyone who comes after them will benefit, and they learn how to write proper documentation, and they feel like they've contributed value. So all of these things combined are parts of a developer. I'm not saying this is everything. I'm sure I've missed plenty. Kindness, for example, is not on the slide. And that's, again, something you can only teach by being that way. Yeah, so let's see, how do we keep track of that? Well, there are a lot of different kinds of meetings you can do. Now we're in the corporate world. First of all, whenever I hire someone new, and maybe that's a bit different based on whether you've actually hired them yourself, or whether you're being given them, I always do a kickoff meeting. So obviously when you onboard someone, you do a kickoff, but if you're in a situation, as I was before, where you get handed a new trainee in, and you're just you don't really have a choice, you have to work with them. Well, you set a kickoff meeting, you get to know them, you talk for half an hour, maybe an hour, you set some expectations, talk about what we're going to do. There's going to be this 3-month cycle, and in the beginning you're going to learn the language, and you're going to use this website and that website and this book. And afterwards I'm going to put you on working on this product. And eventually it'd be great if you could do a presentation that shows to the other trainees what you've done. We also have to go over when I want you to show up in the office, because every department does that differently. And no, I do not require you to be here at 8, because in our department it's fine if you show up before the stand-up, but just stay long enough to contribute value. Then do regular feedback talks. So you're obviously going to talk to them every day, hopefully, but every once in a while, maybe every week in the beginning, maybe less often later, you want to just go to a meeting room, sit down and have a little chat. That can be just as little as 5 minutes, it can be more. There might be a process involved in your company, like writing things down into some HR application, or there might not be. But it's important to announce these meetings well in advance, because it's really uncomfortable if you just go and show up and you're like, my office now, but doesn't feel good. But we've probably all encountered that, and you just go, damn it, what have I done? Am I going to be sacked now? So that's not great. Just send like an email in advance, a few days, and write a summary of what you're going to be talking about with them. And obviously, if it's a recurring meeting, that just goes in the meeting invitation of the calendar your company has, probably. And then follow that script. And if you give feedback, make sure to remember that feedback goes both ways. So you listen to their feedback as well, and you try to encourage that you actually tell them what they don't like. And if they have some problems, you address them. If they feel uncomfortable with something, you address that. Then there's ticket analysis meetings. So when you just start out, you're going to have a lot of details in the tickets. You don't have to write all of that in the beginning. You can sit down with them and go through the ticket, and initially you make the notes, and later on they're going to make the notes themselves while you tell them what you want them to do, or while you figure it out together. Maybe you'll go to some whiteboard and write some stuff down. And then there's obviously feedback and evaluation. So maybe every half a year, or maybe after that 3-month cycle, you're going to have to tell them how they did, and you're going to have to write that down. Again, when you invite them to these meetings, tell them way in advance, tell them what's required, and be ready to go through legal requirements with them. So in the German companies I've worked at, we had these plans where the government told us which kinds of things we had to teach them. So we would go through the whole thing together, and it's like, databases, yeah, we've done that bit, this bit. Giving presentations, no. Talking about legal, no. Oh, maybe, oh, cables, yeah, you've wired your own desk. We can have like a check mark here. So we did that. And that gave them the feeling that they were contributing as well. And they took that positive feeling and when they moved on to the next department. So I've already said a little bit about feedback talks. It's also important to not just blame them. You always want to support them. If they did something wrong, you just tell them off. You tell them why they did it wrong, how they could have done it better, and what they can do to improve for next time. So this generally goes for everyone you're managing, not only trainees, obviously. Then I'd like to talk about the rule of 2. There's not only one master and one apprentice. There are much more people, because there's a whole tech team, and your trainees are just as much part of the tech team as you are. Even if maybe you're the manager, but the people that are your peers, they're also their peers, and they can learn from every one of them, and everyone in the team can learn from the new trainees or the new apprentices. You have to make sure that they are part of that team, and you want to make sure that they go to all the meetings, that they feel comfortable enough to actually say something. You, for example, introduce moderating the stand-up in a round-robin sort of thing. Like every day someone else moderates the stand-up. Here's the tickets, this ticket, what's the status on this? Have you worked on this? Have you worked on that? What's the progress? Is anyone stuck? So if they have to do that, they'll feel comfortable talking to everyone. They'll feel comfortable opening their mouth if they have questions. They'll not just sit there in the briefing meeting going like, I hope this is over soon. I had a question, but I can't really ask it because there are all of these experienced people and I'm afraid of them. So you want them to feel comfortable in the team. And at the same time, you want to be part of their group. If you have more than one young person in general, and as the Perl community grows older, I think this is more important. You hire new people, they'll be younger, there's a generational difference there. Try and bridge that gap. Try to be within their team, especially if you have a whole group of trainees. Go to lunch with them. Maybe if you're the manager, once in a while just take them out for lunch. There's nothing wrong with that. You can probably afford to do that even if your company doesn't cover it, but their salary is going to be much lower and they'll have to bring their sandwich for lunch. So maybe every quarter of a year, just take them to a nice restaurant and have a good chat with them. Just try to make sure that they're all comfortable with you. So, yeah. Then we've got technical skills. So obviously version control is one of them. There are the Perl basics, there are web frameworks we have to work with. My opinion, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel on those. I can go to a meeting room and teach about loops and teach about if conditions and teach about regular expressions and everything, or maybe about Git, but there's really doesn't really make a lot of sense to do that because there are people who can do that better than I can. I can help them when they're stuck, yes, but I think my time is more valuably spent doing something else, whereas they can use a book or they can use an online resource like YouTube and maybe watch a really good 3-hour talk on Git where someone constructs a Git repository with little post-it notes and sticks and blocks. Maybe we know someone in the Perl community who can do that. So they're really good resources, and I think it makes sense to use them. But then there's code review, and there are whiteboards, and there's pair programming, and all these things that you can use to actually interact with them in a meaningful way. So we're going to talk about code review on the next slide. Whiteboards and diagrams, on the other hand, what I really like to do is if there's a new concept like MVC, for example, at some point they need to understand how this stuff works. Let's say we work with Catalyst. So we just go to a room, just draw this diagram, and you build it up, and you explain why your application works that way. And afterwards, you take a picture of this or make a printout or whatever, and they can ask questions, and they can actually draw their own little arrows in the diagram, and that makes a lot more sense than using a video in that case, I think. And pair programming is important as well. On the one hand, because you can work with them, and on the other hand, if they work together. Give them the keyboard and only help them when they're stuck. I do that all the time. I don't call it pair programming. I call it, oh, you're stuck, I'll sit down and help you. And it works. And I think the best kind of thing to happen to you is when you've got several trainees at different levels and they start helping each other. I recall this one case where I had someone who was working on this aforementioned HR software, and he was not the strongest of the trainees we had, and he got really stuck, and his friend came up to get him to go for a smoke, and he said, wait, I need to solve this, and he went, hang on, I've done that before. And then another one that I'd had before walked past a year higher, and they went, hey, can you come in for a second? And then the three of them stood there and figured it out together. And I went, okay, I must have done something right. This is good. This worked. And that's the best kind of feeling you can have when you see that they actually are comfortable enough to help each other, and they're motivated enough to go and do that. And they could have just left it and gone for a smoke. So anyway, let's talk about code review. So this is the only code aside from the heading that I have, maybe on this side. So basically, they wanted to count DBX class result set thing, like how many rows are there. So okay, they wrote this code. We can probably really easily spot what's wrong with this code. It's all fine, it compiles, but why didn't you just use count? Hang on, we shouldn't say that, because obviously if they'd known that there's this count method, they'd done it. So why didn't you just use that? Well, apparently they didn't know about it. It's not they just use it. They could have known. They could have looked up in the documentation. But hey, what they actually did is they figured out that they can just get all of the things, loop over them, and count them, and that works. So they've solved the problem on their own without making a mistake, and this works. It might not be the most elegant solution, but they figured it out on their own. So instead of just telling them, well, you could have just used count, or why didn't you look that up, you could say, hey, there's this debug trace variable, environment variable that you can put in front of your program. Try and do that, and then look at what it prints out. Maybe like, oh, this does a lot of queries. Okay, maybe I should look at the documentation. And you can go, well, you can in SQL, there's this count star thing. It's like, right. And then they'll find it, and they'll actually have learned that there are different ways to do things. So you always have to encourage them to think for themselves. And that's the best way to learn. Good. So how do you actually develop a developer? I think you can... It is Jira, yes. Nick doesn't like it. It's an older Jira, and it has tickets in German, I think. Oh no, it's in English. Huh. Anyway, so regardless of how your company works, whether it's someone sends email or someone has an actual ticket system, it's always important to visualize their work. So there should be some system for that. You can have post-its and then you can stack them, or you can have little cards, or you can have emails, but there should be something, preferably a ticket system. If you're so inclined, it can be Jira. It can be, there are worse things. Try to do an agile development workflow with Bugzilla. I think Nick is not happy about that one either. Maybe your ticket system is GitHub or GitLab. Doesn't matter, as long as there are tickets. because that way they can see what they're doing if they have to go to school and then they come back and they forgot what they were doing. Hey, there's a ticket. It tells me what I was going to do, and I put some notes in it. Yay, that's great. And if they're really new, you can also create some tickets for them to learn about new things. Like, oh, we're starting a new app, so the first ticket is create an empty skeleton with Dancer 2 on the command line. But it's important. It's important that that there is a visualization of the things they've done. What I like to do is write user stories for them. I mean, in these examples, they're all from the time when I had to make up my own product for them. So we tried to build a minimum viable product. We tried to make lots of individual tickets, like first create the Git repository. So now you have to learn how to do that. You have to go and watch that video that Schwan did, and maybe that's good. And then you create a Catalyst project, and so on and so on, and it slowly grows, and every ticket gets a little bit harder. And they learn how to start with nothing and shape it into something. And then eventually someone will use it and go, hey, this is useful. But, well, I did promise Perl, well, a little bit anyway. If you want them to be involved in the community, probably encourage them to participate in IRC. I've always done that, and your team might have an IRC or a Slack or whatever as well. Encourage them to be part of that as well, obviously. It's fine to ask questions in #Perl. Mostly we're very friendly and helpful there, I believe. Then read the CPAN, and remember that the CPAN is just code. You can go and watch the source of everything, and you can actually go and read the source of the meta CPAN yourself. And why not submit a pull request? Why not fix that typo in the actual meta CPAN search that you've spotted? That's great. You learn a lot, and hey, it's just Catalyst, just like the thing we use at work. That's good. I also like to encourage them to answer on Stack Overflow. I often, when I find an interesting problem on Stack Overflow that someone has answered already, I will just send it to my trainees anyway and go, hey, look at this, don't read the answer, see if you can answer it. Don't post it, or you can if there's no answer, but just see if you can do it yourself. And we can discuss your solution. Maybe your solution is better than mine. Then there used to be the pull request challenge. This slide's a little bit out of date, but there is the pull request club now, which is great as well. I always encourage my my mentees to look at that. And probably the most important is take them to conferences. Now I have just done that. My trainee is here, but he's not in this room because he didn't realize I'm jumping in to give this talk, which is a shame. But, well, anyway, the heart of the Perl community is here, and in the other two rooms as well. That's you. You're awesome. You show them that Perl is a very wonderful, very warm and welcoming thing, and they should be part of that, even if eventually they'll have to work in a different language, but they can carry that spirit forward. So that's pretty much it. I have to skip this slide, these two slides. Thank you very much.